Most marriages go through ups and downs over the years, but end up being positive, meaningful ones. Lifelong experiences. Some may have major interruptions, breakups, and turmoil, but still endure and become successful lifelong unions. We know from statistics that many marriages do not survive for one reason or another. Until last year, I thought I had a strong 10-year marriage. I loved my wife Diana and our 3 children. I had no reason to believe that anything could change until the end of time. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that my marriage would collapse so quickly and so completely, especially for the reason it did. I'm Russell Dawson, just Russ to my friends. I am 41 years old. I got married when I was 31, so I'm a little behind the average man who gets married in his mid-20s. I am married to Diana Lewis, now Diana Dawson, who was 25 years old at the time of her marriage and is now 35. We were married for 10 happy years and had 3 children, Lucy, Gina, and Rory, aged 9, 7, and 5 respectively. I am completely devoted to my family. I am the only child in the family. My father died when I was in elementary school, and I was raised entirely by my mother. Although my father's life insurance was helpful at first, my mother worked hard as a dance instructor to provide us with everything we needed. In high school, I had a job and contributed to the family income. After high school, I went to junior college because we couldn't afford tuition fees at a public university. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in finance. My grades were such that I was able to get a good position at Fidelity Investments. I was able to earn a master's degree in financial management and planning while working this job. During my 12 years at Fidelity, I rose to the level of senior investment advisor. Now I manage dozens of accounts, each worth millions of dollars. My children mean the world to me. I would like to have more children, maybe 5, but Diana said 3 was enough for her. My mother, now retired, lives nearby and adores her grandchildren. I am now financially well enough to take care of my mom and make sure she doesn't need anything. This is the least I can do for her devotion to me as a child. I met Diana at a ski resort 2 years after I started working at Fidelity Investments. This was my first real vacation. We were with 2 different groups of people who seemed to come together as one big group for skiing and post-ski socializing. We were both glad that we lived in the same city and agreed to meet after returning home. We started dating, became exclusive, and got engaged. A year after we met, we got married. Since then, life has been idyllic until last year. I know when it all started. It was the evening that Diana received a phone call from her identical twin sister, Diana, in Burbank, California. She fell and broke her ankle. She said she called to let him know she was okay. Her left leg was in a cast, and after a few days in bed, she would be able to get up and use a walker and then crutches. She needed to be in a cast for 6 weeks. Diana asked how she was coping with 2 children who, like our 2 older children, were in elementary school. Dion said Gary, her ex-husband, has been a great help, but she expects that even with his help, she will have difficulty coping with them while partially incapacitated. It was obvious to me that Diana wanted Diana to come to California and help her while she was recovering. Diana and Dion were very close as sisters, especially because they were identical twins. They separated only after I married Diana and moved to Reston, Virginia to work at the local Fidelity office. The sisters kept in touch constantly. All of our vacations seemed to involve seeing Dion and Gary in California or them visiting us in Virginia. If we went somewhere else, it was always a second vacation. I have to go to California, Diana announced as soon as she hung up after the call. Dion needs me. I knew better than to argue with her, even though I needed to make some arrangements to be a mother and father to my children while she was away, which I knew would be a few weeks. The next day, Diana arranged a flight to Los Angeles. She packed 2 suitcases, preparing for a long stay. 2 days after receiving Diana's call, I put Diana on an early morning United Airlines flight, a direct flight from Dulles to Los Angeles. While Diana was preparing for her flight to California, I arranged for a neighbor, whose children attend the same school and classes, to pick up my children from school. She watched the kids until I got home from work every weekday. I enjoyed the time I had to bond with the children. I became more active in their daily lives and also took over the responsibilities that Diana usually did. My mom helped a lot too. Diana had been gone for about 4 weeks when I received a message from Gary, Donna's ex-husband, 2 years ago. Gary and I were best friends when he was married to Dion, and I missed him when Dion stayed with us. I saw him from time to time when we visited Dion in California. He was also very attentive to his children and often visited Dion for dinner and other events, or took them away on weekends. The text from Gary was simple. I've set up a Zoom link for you and me at 7 p.m. This is important. Have a bottle of your favorite bourbon on hand. I fed the kids a little early and had the youngest in bed by 6:30 p.m. The girls played quietly in their bedrooms, so by 7 p.m. I was ready for a Zoom session with Gary. We connected online and immediately saw each other via the internet. We greeted each other and talked a little about our children. Finally, Gary got to the point of his call. "What do you know about our divorce?" he asked. "Well," I said, "that was a surprise to me. I thought you and Dion had a strong marriage. You seemed to love each other and were happy with your children. Your divorce was stunning news to me. I'm not sure how much Diana knew about your situation. If she knew you were going to separate, she never mentioned it until the divorce was in the middle." "Do you know why we got divorced?" Gary asked. I replied, "I was told it was due to irreconcilable differences." Gary continued, "I guess it was a good general reason for divorce, but it wasn't the exact reason. We were really happy for the first few years, especially with our children. However, Dion became more and more dissatisfied with our lifestyle. She didn't like the income of a high school physics teacher and a part-time water polo and swimming coach. Even with her extra income as a part-time accountant, there was not enough money to afford the lifestyle she wanted." "So you broke up because of money?" I intervened. "Yes and no," Gary answered. "One evening when I came home from water polo team practice, I found Dion waiting for me at the dinner table with a glass of wine in her hand and a glass for me. I felt it was bad, and I knew it wasn't good. When she said, 'Honey, we need to talk,' she repeated why she was unhappy and then told me that she had found an opportunity to make a lot more money. I didn't think she was talking about a random promotion or a new job, so I waited for the shoe to drop. 'I applied to become a woman who has sex for money,' she said bluntly. 'What?' I finally said. She went on to explain that a week ago, a friend of hers, with whom she worked, but who has since left the company, came in and wanted to take her out to lunch. At the restaurant, her friend told her that this was a great way to make a lot of money. She thought that my wife was more than beautiful to work there too. Diana said that she was intrigued by the idea and, without telling me, applied to the same agency as her friend. They liked her and intended to do it. 'Over my corpse,' I said. She continued with rationalization and justification for her decision. She said that sex is just sex, and it has nothing to do with her love for me, blah, blah, blah. I said I wouldn't stand for it. I won't be a cuckold for an unfaithful wife who wants to spice up her boring home life with sex with other men. She explained that everything would be okay if I could overcome my prejudices about her evenings with clients and not let my ego interfere with what was purely business. She continued to say that she would make up for all the time she spent on tasks and will not neglect me or the children. Eventually, she said she was going to do it regardless of my objections, and I said I would divorce her if she did. She didn't believe I would divorce because of the children. After her first date, I filed for divorce and suffered quite a lot in the process. Dion received primary custody of the children and therefore remained in our house. I found myself in a position where I was paying half the mortgage, child support, and child support. I also ended up in a two-bedroom apartment halfway between my house and school. I have the right to see my children every second week, every second birthday or holiday, and 6 weeks in the summer." "Damn it, Gary," I exclaimed. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry." "Fortunately," Gary continued, "I'm on good terms with Dion. I have no problem seeing the kids. I'm often at the house for dinner. I have to admit that I'm still a little in love with Dion, but not enough to sell my soul to be with the children and suffer the humiliation of being her cuckold. Besides, things have worked out better for me than you could ever imagine. Since Dion often goes on her dates on Fridays and Saturdays, she relies on me to watch our kids. I'm much cheaper than a nanny, and we have an agreement that if I take the children on Friday, they stay with me for the whole weekend. It is not uncommon for me to have children 3 out of 4 days off. The children love my apartment complex because it has a large pool, and it is opposite. There is a large park with a playground. Meanwhile, Dion takes them on weekdays when she has to get them up in the morning, cook their breakfast, and pack their school lunches. She is responsible for picking them up after school, preparing dinner, bathing them, and putting them to bed. In other words, all the work involved with raising children. And as it turns out, Gary continued, I'm quite a sought-after man among the ladies right now. A lot of single women, divorcees, and widows find a single man with a good job a good thing. I've avoided serious relationships for now and am just enjoying life. I wish I could go out on dates a lot more often than I do, except for the fact that I have kids so often that it interferes with my social life. So, all in all, I'm doing really well as a single dad. I replied to Gary, I'm happy for you in that regard. We'll meet for a couple of beers when I come to California again. Gary became more serious. There's something I have to tell you, Russ, and it's hard to discuss, so please drink a little more bourbon and listen carefully. Say what you want, Gary. I'm ready. Without the slightest bit of amusement, Gary began to tell the real reason for his call. 2 weeks ago on Friday, I went to the house to pick up my kids. I knocked on the door and Dion answered, only it wasn't Dion. At first I thought it was her because of her short hair, but then I noticed that she didn't wear a cast. It was Diana. She had her hair cut like Dion's. I asked her about it, and she simply said that she liked Dion's short haircut and decided to repeat it. I thought it was a little strange, but I didn't think much of it after I left the house. And then last Friday, I was a little late because I had swim practice at school. I arrived at the house at 7 p.m. Instead of the usual 4 p.m., Dion let me in and told me to wait while she got my kids, and they found my backpacks. While I was waiting in the foyer, I heard someone coming down the stairs. When I turned to look, it was Diana. She was wearing a knee-length black cocktail dress with a thigh-high slit. As she walked, I could see the top of her thigh-high stockings. The dress was off the shoulder and low enough to show the top of her breasts. She was wearing black high heels with diamonds. Diana didn't notice me until she was halfway down. Then she stopped. She looked confused and awkward and said something like, Gary, I didn't know you were here. I thought you'd already taken the kids. No, I said, I'm late today. About this time, my kids ran up to me and hugged my legs. They said they were all ready to go and hoped it wasn't too late to go swimming. I told them we'd grab some pizza on the way to my place and go to the pool. Dion returned at this time. She saw Diana on the stairs, looked at me, and suddenly looked as uncomfortable as Diana. Then, with a kiss on the cheek, she hurried me out of the house, telling me to stay for dinner when I got the kids back on Sunday afternoon. There was a pause as I tried to comprehend everything I heard. Finally, I said, What does this all mean, Gary? Gary responded, I hate to say it, Russ, but I think Diana is replacing Diana at her job while she recovers. I think Diana is either presenting herself as Diana or simply offering herself to Diana's clients as an alternative, while Dion will not be able to return to work. What the hell, was all I could say as I drank my second glass of bourbon. Gary continued to apologize. I was struggling with whether or not I should tell you this or just let you and Diana sort it out when she got home. I'm sure the sisters didn't want me to see Diana ready for a date, so I guess that they didn't want me to know and were going to hide it from you after Diana returned home. Damn it, damn it, damn it, was all I could say at first, until everything I had learned began to affect me. I prefer to know the truth rather than be ignorant, I said. Somehow I'll get through this. I thank Gary for having the courage to tell me something that was obviously very difficult for him. He said that if I needed anything from him to just call him. After Gary disconnected from Zoom, I sat at the computer and drank 2 more shots of bourbon. Conflicting emotions grew inside me: pain, humiliation, loss, and anger. I reminded myself that there was no evidence that Diana was working on behalf of Dion, and that maybe, just maybe, there was an alternate reality. I came up with several action plans, none of which were realistic. I could hire a private investigator in Los Angeles to investigate her weekend. It was an approachable idea, but I scrapped it. I might just wait until she gets home and see what she says. And then I wondered if she came home and pretended nothing happened, and we continued to live as before, would I be able to stand it? Will I be able to be a silent cuckold? I answered my own question without hesitation, no. Before I could decide what action to take, half a bottle of bourbon got the better of me. I went upstairs and tried to put on a happy face to my daughters as I put them to bed. I fell into my bed, taking off only my shoes, and fell asleep within minutes. The next day was Sunday. We all slept long on Sundays. When I woke up, I had a hangover and a headache. The headache reminded me that I had drunk too much last night. Then I remembered why, and I was overcome with depression and anxiety. After coffee, I prepared a small breakfast for myself and my children and woke them up. The older girls were good at helping me with my little brother, and soon we were all sitting around the kitchen. We decided as a group to go visit my grandmother, my mother, for the day. The children loved her, and their mother spoiled them as a good grandmother should. It was just 11 a.m. on the East Coast, and Mom was entertaining all 3 kids in the kitchen. They were baking cookies. Meanwhile, I was relaxing on a lounge chair in the backyard. I decided to take a course of action, or at least the first step. I wrote to Diana. Little Bird told me you are selling sex for money instead of your sister. It was about 8 a.m. on the West Coast. I assumed they were both asleep, so I didn't expect an answer right away. Maybe Diana had a late night. I later found out that Diana wasn't even in Diana's house at the time. She slept elsewhere. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I received a reply to my message. Did you speak to Gary? Everything that was said in it. I immediately sent back my original message. Little Bird told me you are selling sex for money instead of your sister. I had to wait 2 hours for an answer. It's complicated. I'm helping Dion. My answer was very short. I'll take it as a yes. The last message from Diana read, I will explain you everything when I return home. I love you. Obviously, Diana had no intention of discussing her actions in Los Angeles any further. It didn't matter because I had confirmed my worst fears. My wife was a woman who sold sex for money, and I was a cuckold. At that moment, I almost completely stopped all communication with my wife. Whereas before the children and I would call or receive a call from her every 2 or 3 days, now I only called when the children wanted to talk to their mother. I didn't talk to her myself, but left the children to do it. At first, Diana asked the children to give the phone to their father, but I always refused. When Diana called home, I let the kids answer the call and left the room until the call ended. Diana texted and emailed me continuously after I confirmed what she was doing in Donna's place, but I never responded. As time went on, she tried to call, text, and email less and less, finally repeating that we would talk when she got home. I spoke with Gary on Zoom several times before Diana returned. He sympathized with me and asked what I intended to do. I told him that I have no idea yet. I emphasized that no matter what happens, I don't want to lose my children. Among other topics we discussed was how much money Diana made. I learned that the difference between a woman of easy virtue and which provides paid escort services is that a woman of easy virtue exchanges sex for money, while an escort sells her time as a companion, usually by the hour. Any sex that occurs between an escort and her client is free. However, what she did for free was up for debate. Women of easy virtue have a price list for sexual activities. High-quality female escorts in big cities like New York can cost up to and over $5,000 an hour. What happens during the hours she acts as a companion probably includes everything, considering the prices paid for them in the first place. It is also common practice for the agency to charge about half of the price at which the escort is booked. So if you negotiate a companion for $1,000 an hour, the agency will take half of that, $500 up front, and she will only get $500 an hour for her time. Girls can often increase their income by receiving tips from their clients for excellent service. These tips can amount to thousands of dollars, depending on the level at which they work. So it is beneficial for them to do whatever it takes to please their customer. Gary said he contacted Dion's agency under a false name and inquired about their prices. It turned out that Dion's agency is one of the highest quality agencies working in the Los Angeles area. The minimum cost was $1,000 per hour, with a minimum order of 3 hours. Gary theorized that Dion had a niche client base that she specialized in, and that was older men between the ages of 40 and 60. At this age, a man doesn't necessarily want to be seen with a 22-year-old girl in his arms. Rather, he wants something more age-appropriate. Dion was about 35 years old, incredibly beautiful and sexy when she wore makeup, but not so young that she couldn't be seen with a 55-year-old gentleman. These older men also typically booked escort girls for longer periods of time than younger men who simply wanted a younger woman to spend the night with. Gary estimated that if Dion only went out on a date once a month for an evening that lasted from 6 p.m. to 9 a.m., that is, 15 hours, she would earn about $7,500 plus tips. Most of her dates didn't seem to be that long, maybe 7 p.m. to 1 a.m., in which case she only made about $3,000 plus tips. Gary noted that with 3 dates a month, Dion was making more money than him. Diana was supposed to return home in 2 days. She sent me an email scheduling her arrival. I sent her a reply. Since you were a $1,000 assistant, you should be able to afford a taxi. Diana left Los Angeles at 10 a.m. She was scheduled to arrive in Dulles around 6 p.m. By the time she arrived home, it was already after 7 p.m. When the taxi pulled up to our house, the children ran out to meet her. They hugged her and helped her carry her light luggage into the house. I went out to help with 2 large suitcases. When Diana saw me approach the taxi, she released herself from the children's embrace and walked towards me with open arms, as if she was going to hug me. I dodged her, picked up my suitcases, and followed everyone into the house. I carried her luggage upstairs to our bedroom. Meanwhile, the kids announced that we had saved dinner for her, pizza. In front of the children, I tried to act happy. I welcomed Diana home and asked a few routine questions, such as, how was the flight? How is Diana doing? Is she out of her caste? In the presence of my son and daughters, I was attentive and verbally affectionate. When most of the screams and delight died down, I apologized and took the children upstairs to swim. I told Diana to relax and that I would be back in an hour. She agreed that it was a good plan to start the evening. She said she would go up to kiss the children goodnight when they were in bed. When I went downstairs, Diana went upstairs to visit each of the children. I opened a bottle of her favorite red wine, poured her a glass, and placed the bottle and glass on the dining room table. Then I poured myself a glass of bourbon and sat down, waiting for Diana to come down. 20 minutes later, she came down, noticed a glass of wine, and sat down at her place at the table. I said nothing. He just drank his drink and looked at her. It was obvious that she was nervous and defensive. She began, I know I owe you an explanation for my actions, but I don't know how to say something that won't hurt you or make you angry. I tried to rehearse everything to make it clear to you, no matter what I did, I love you deeply and only you. I took another sip of my drink and waited. I was hoping I would never have to answer to you for what I did. If Gary hadn't seen me before the date, I wouldn't have gone through this and put you through this. We could have just carried on as we were before I left. But now it's impossible, isn't it? I slowly shook my head from side to side. I'll try to start from the beginning and hope that you will understand me as I go, she said, taking a large sip of wine. I arrived at Dion's house late in the evening. Gary was there. He met me at the door, hugged me, and let me in. He started preparing dinner for his children and told me to go see Dion. She was spending a lot of time in bed and was still taking a lot of painkillers. She was very happy to see me, and we hugged and cried together for several minutes. I told her not to worry about anything because I will manage the house while she recovers. I started by giving her a bath and helping her get dressed for dinner. When we came downstairs, Gary had already prepared dinner. His children helped him set the table while he served. I couldn't help but admire him. He was a wonderful husband. He was more than enough of a provider for Dion, and besides you, he was the best father in the world. It always saddened me that he and Dion divorced. I gave Diana a questioning look that said without words, "What did you expect when Diana started working as an escort for men for money?" Diana answered my silent question. She didn't think he would get a divorce, especially because of the children. She wanted him to make any changes in their marriage to accept Diana's extramarital activities. She wanted to compensate him for this when she wasn't working, but he did not want to live with her on the terms that she dictated. He filed for divorce immediately. What's funny is she still loves him. She would do anything to get him back. I chimed in, "Except to give up your new lifestyle." "No," Diana said, she wouldn't do that. She quickly became addicted to this lifestyle. Money, parties, and sex with strange men. It was a great adventure for her. Diana continued, "Dion is sure he's still in love with her too. He doesn't touch her, however. He doesn't even have sex with her. Apparently Gary has quickly developed his social circle and doesn't need her for communication or sex. It really upsets Dion that Gary often dates other women, but of course she has nothing to say about that. She is grateful that she and Gary have remained on such friendly terms. Gary is often in the house to help with one thing or another, although his main interest is enjoying time with the children. He sometimes sleeps in the guest bedroom on special occasions such as birthdays and holidays. Together, Dion and Gary enjoy children on Christmas, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, and other family holidays. Although the information about Gary and Dion was interesting, it seemed to me that Diana was stalling for time, so I raised my index finger and made a small circular motion, indicating that she should move on to the important part of her story. Diana has been working for 2 years now. In the first year, she went through a lot of men, old men, fat men, all kinds including many strange types. She really loved some men for various reasons. Firstly, the ones she liked the most were quite fit and good-looking. She felt good with them. In addition, they were very rich and took her to expensive restaurants, luxurious parties, the theater, and the like. They could easily afford her services, and in addition, they usually gave. She received large tips for excellent service. She began to rely on this stable of men, about 12 of them, for her main income. However, when she broke her ankle, she could not serve them as before, and probably will not be able to serve 6 or more. 7 weeks, and she needed that income to survive financially. "Why?" I asked. "Didn't she just ask us for help? We could have given her all the help she needed. She wouldn't even have to pay the money back." "It would help for the period of time she was incapacitated," Diana agreed. However, she was scared to death of losing her most valuable clients during this period. By the time she could return to work, they might have left her and found someone else. Then she would have to start all over again, going through all sorts of strange and dangerous types. In addition, her stable of men consists of gentlemen who pay to spend a long time with her, often up to 12 or 15 hours per date. A 12-hour booking means $6,000 a night for Dion. The men she had to sift through to find her current clientele could only use her services for a few hours at a time. Also, Diana continued, Gary is taking steps to reduce the amount of money he gives her for the house and child support. Through his lawyer, he informed the court that his ex-wife earned more money than him due to her personal service. When the court considers these claims, Dion will not be able to afford the lifestyle to which she is accustomed. She will have to work even harder to make up the difference if she wants to afford her BMW, club membership, clothes, and other luxuries that have become necessities for her. We were alone in Dion's living room when this thought suddenly occurred to both of us at the same time. "You could replace me," she said. Nobody would know, just us. We look exactly the same in every way. We have the same face and the same body. The only difference between us now is our hairstyles. If you cut your hair short like me, no one, even Gary or Russell, can tell us apart. Dion continued her campaign. I know you love Russell to death and you wouldn't want to cheat on him, but it's really not cheating. It's just sex. Your heart will still belong to Russell, and he'll never know. When you come home, everything will be the same as it was before you left. Dion didn't back down. I'm pretty sure you'll love it, Diana. These men are very charming and will treat you like a queen. You'll go to exciting places and meet amazing people you'd never meet at home, and the sex will be incredible for you. I'm sure it will blow your mind. I told Dion that it sounded like quite an adventure, but that I needed to think about it a little. She said, That's fine, but in the morning I'll send you to my hairdresser and cut your hair like mine. I agreed to this for now. In the morning, Dion made an appointment with the hairdresser and sent me to her personal salon. Her stylist worked in a very exclusive salon where very rich women went. I enjoyed conversations with several of the ladies there. More than once that morning, clients in the salon confused me with Dion. When I got home, Dion told me I had a date with one of her gentlemen on Friday night. I told her she was moving too fast, but she said this man would like me so much that he might fall in love with me. Him. Over the next few days, she told me everything I needed to know about my date. She gave me as much information about him as she knew. He was from out of town, traveled frequently, was married with children, made his fortune in venture capital, loved football, and so on. She told him what he liked in bed and what to expect in terms of sex. Thursday night, we were in Dion's bedroom going through all her clothes. She had beautiful cocktail dresses and evening wear. They were all very expensive. I probably tried on 20 different dresses, and they all fit me really well. She had expensive jewelry that matched it. Some of the jewelry were gifts from her men. She had dozens of beautiful shoes to go with every outfit. I looked so good and felt so sexy. I think it was that night that I agreed to replace Dion and become an escort for money. In fact, I started looking forward to it. So much for staying true to me, I said. So much for your wedding vows. I justified my decision in many ways. I told myself that I still love you and that my heart belongs to you, despite what I was going to do with my body. I convinced myself that I had to do this for my sister. My mind said that it would be outside the body, that it wouldn't really be me. Finally, I told myself that I wouldn't let you know what I was going to do. What you don't know won't hurt us. I can learn something. Something that will make our love more exciting. Finally, I promised myself that I will make it up to you by being the best wife in the world for the rest of your life after returning home. So much for these thoughts, I muttered, clenching my jaw to maintain my calm, concerned demeanor. It was so unfortunate, Diana continued, that Gary was late that Friday night and showed up at the house late that night just as I had finished getting dressed for the date and was starting to walk down the stairs. I wanted to talk to him and ask him not to tell you, but I was unable to speak at that moment. In a minute or two, his children surrounded him, and Dion pushed him out of the house. I just knew that he would soon realize that he had done it. So, I asked her again, how was your date? Diana at least had the decency to lower her eyes and then turn away from me. I'm so sorry to say this, Russell, but it was wonderful. Dion was right, my boyfriend was a real gentleman, and I had a very good time with him. He was handsome and well-built. I was nervous at first, but he was so charming. That calmed my anxiety, and I had a great time. What about sex? I asked. The sex was very good. I haven't felt such passion since we dated 10 years ago. It was new, different. Although I really liked him, there was no love. It was just sex. I stayed with him all night and came home the next morning. He even gave me $1,000 tip for being a wonderful companion. So, you've officially become a woman of easy virtue, I said without emotion, and I'm officially a cuckold. I am not a woman of easy virtue. I was an escort. These are different things. What is the difference? I asked and answered my own question. A woman of easy virtue gets paid for sex, and an escort gets paid for her time, and the sex is free. Diana knew that this was a common difference that highly paid call girls use to justify what they do, and she said nothing. Tell me, Diana, I asked, was there anything you didn't do in bed for your client? Diana answered reluctantly, but she knew it was time for the truth. These men pay $1,000 an hour for company. It would be unfair to them to limit what is acceptable and what is not, although it is generally accepted that this cannot include pain. Diana didn't respond with words. She simply nodded her head, looking at her glass of wine. Tell me, Diana, I asked, how many dates have you been on, and how many men have you slept with in the 7 weeks you've been away? Please, Russell, she begged, no more. My eyes told her that I wanted an answer. Reluctantly, she replied, I've been on 9 dates, most of them overnight. I've slept with 7 men, 2 of them. And you enjoyed that sex, didn't you? I said sarcastically. A faint yes was the only answer I heard from her. You must have made a lot of money, I remarked. I made a little over $40,000 directly and almost $7,000 in tips. I gave almost all of it to Dion. What are you going to do with the money you kept for yourself? I asked out of pure curiosity. I wanted to do something for us, like go on a really nice vacation or renovate the lake house. Some of it could go toward the kids' education. I started to feel insulted. What makes you think that in my wildest dreams I would want anything to do with the money you made as a prostitute? You can burn it for all I care, and don't think about spending a cent on children. I don't want them to be desecrated by your infidelity. Diana sensed the contempt in my voice and realized that I was holding back a lot of anger. For the first time ever, I saw fear of me in her eyes. I finished my glass of straight bourbon and poured myself another. Diana took the opportunity to make her statement. Please, 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 Russell, trust that I love you and only you. I know I hurt you. I can't imagine how angry you are at me right now. I did this for my sister. She's my sister, and I couldn't help but help her. It seemed the only thing possible then. I noticed that she didn't apologize for what she did, only that it hurt me. I will never do anything like this again in my entire life. All I want now is to be your wife and the mother of your children. I want what we had before, a loving husband, happy and healthy children, a wonderful family. Please, give me a chance to prove to you that I can be everything you want in a wife. Hopefully, in time, you will be able to forgive me and view what happened as an anomaly in an otherwise perfect marriage. Don't hope so, Diana, I replied. I can't imagine a man who could forgive such treatment, such utter disrespect, such betrayal. I didn't betray you, she began to say. Stop talking nonsense, I interrupted her. I'm going for a walk. I need to be alone, I said, taking my windbreaker from the closet and leaving the house. I heard Diana crying when I left. As I began my walk, I began to cry. I was glad I was able to hold on while Diana told me what happened in California. That was not easy, but now I felt sorry for myself. I felt a huge loss and didn't know how to make it better. At the same time, I was deeply hurt by the person I loved most, and I was angry, no, furious at what had been done to me. But what should I do now? The extreme answers to my questions were simple. I could divorce her or forgive her. None of these alternatives seemed acceptable. Divorce will destroy my family, and I may lose the daily contact with my children that I value so highly. But how can I forgive such terrible behavior? I cannot. I returned home after 1 a.m. The house was dark. Diana was in bed. If we had a guest room, I would have used it, but we didn't have one. I snuck into our bedroom and stripped down to my underwear. Diana seemed to be asleep. I slid into bed on my side, turning my back to her. I felt her touch my shoulder and moved away. I heard her son, but she didn't try to touch me anymore. I was frustrated because I didn't have a good solution to my problem. I didn't even have a marginal solution. There was no solution. I was once told that the source of frustration is the inability to make a decision. However, time has offered an alternative. One of the reasons I married Diana was her sparkling personality. She was a naturally happy person and a pleasure to be around. While I was looking for a solution, she returned to her pleasant nature and easy demeanor. She was careful not to intrude. I didn't show any affection towards her, and she didn't try to force her feelings on me. With the children, we looked like the normal caring parents they were used to. Other than that, I was quiet and reserved. One day, I heard Diana talking on the phone with Diana. I couldn't understand exactly what they were talking about, so I imagined the worst. I asked her what the conversation was about. She said it was nothing important, but I knew she was hiding something. I told her very directly that my imagination told me that they were talking about their experiences and adventures with the various men they slept with while she was working in Dion's place. She didn't deny it. I told her if she wanted to talk to Dion, she should never do it in front of me. From my point of view, Dion was to blame for everything that happened. However, as time passed, our communication became more normal. We talked about most things, work, children, weather, etc., as before. I spent as much time as possible with the children and Diana left us to interact. After the kids were in bed, we would sit in the living room to watch an hour or two of TV. We had favorite programs that we watched together, or we took turns choosing a movie for the evening. Weeks passed, then months. Gradually, we started interacting more together. Many of our activities centered around children and their interests, sports, picnics, hiking, beach, and similar events. Eventually, I noticed that Diana became a little more affectionate. When we admired our children, she took my hand. While watching TV, she sat closer to me. In the mornings in bed, I would find her curled up next to me. The events that happened in California became more and more blurry as time passed, and my wife reminded me more and more of our happy life before. I started hugging her while we were watching TV. I think Diana sensed that I had left much of my hostility behind me. After almost 6 months, our marriage seemed to be back on track. I tried to push the events in California to the far corners of my mind, although I did not forget or forgive her for her misdeeds. I wanted my family back so badly that I could swallow my pride and move on. We were so happy just being normal for the next few months that I gained confidence that I could spend the rest of my life with my wife without difficulty. But then everything went wrong again. This happened about 6 months after our relationship returned to normal. It was a Friday night, and I came home to find Diana cooking one of my favorite dishes. She told me that she had taken the children to my mother's for the weekend. The dinner table was covered with candles, and a bottle of my favorite red wine was open and breathing. After dinner, I was quite relaxed and expected that we would have sex that evening. I settled into our leather couch, ready for Diana to join me for a cozy evening before bed. Diana finished washing the dishes and joined me in the living room after dimming the lights. For some reason, she didn't sit next to me, but sat on the edge of the sofa at the other end. "Russell," she said, "you know that I love you more than anything in this world, don't you?" It was an odd question, and given her somewhat formal position on the sofa, the situation was beginning to seem odd. "Yes, I know," I replied. "Honey, I need to tell you something that will be uncomfortable for you to hear. I don't want you to get angry, but just listen to what I have to say before you react." The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I was not so calmed by good food and wine that I failed to recognize the difficult situation ahead. "This sounds like a honey, we need to talk kind of conversation," I said, sitting up straight and turning to face her. "Russell, I want to be," she said bluntly. "What did you say?" was my only response to this incredible statement. "I'm going to become a female escort for men for money," she said. "Only over my corpse," was my first real response to her statement. "Please, honey," she said, trying to touch my face. I moved her hand away. "Listen to me for a minute. I've been thinking about this for months. The few weeks I spent with Dion in California left a lasting impression on me. You knew I enjoyed the experience, even though I regretted that it caused you so much pain and damaged our marriage and our relationship. The truth is that I fell in love with the experience and the sex. I never completely got over the memories of those encounters. Wait, I said. You promised that you would never do anything like that again. You only wanted to be an ordinary housewife and mother. I know what I said, Russell, she replied, and I really meant it then. But I never completely put those days behind me. Dion seems to have so many adventures in her life compared to me. Don't get me wrong, I love our family with you and my children, but I want more and believe that I can have both. Before I could say anything, Diana continued, I've already applied to an agency in town, and they've accepted me. They think there's a niche market for a model my age, someone who's attractive to an older group of men, who would not feel comfortable in the company of a 22-year-old student. This is the same niche in which Dion is popular. In the next week or so, I'll be doing mandatory training at the agency. Personal hygiene, personal financial services, personal safety, personal care and makeup, and more. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the stylist to get my hair done, and then to the agency office for glamour photos that they will post on the internet. I won't stand for this, Diana, I said when she paused. Oh, honey, she said and tried to touch my face again. I pushed her hand away again. I know it's a shock, and I can't imagine how much this hurts you. But you will overcome the pain, I know you will. You've done this before. That's what gives me confidence that I can do this, and we can stay a happy family. You're overestimating what I can handle, Diana. I won't be a cuckold again. I won't be able to look my children in the eye knowing they'll see me as less than a man. I'll lose their respect. I'll lose their respect for myself. Russell, you're too hard on yourself. You're letting your ego get in the way of our happy future as a family. Diana, I said sternly, you completely underestimate the importance of a man's ego to him. Then she hit me like a truck. You don't want to end up in Gary's position, do you? Now I'm really angry. I clenched my jaw and glared at the woman I loved. Is this a veiled threat, Diana? You're telling me that if I divorce you, you'll take custody of my kids, stay in the house, I'll pay alimony and child support, and I'll end up in a 2-bedroom apartment, hoping to see my kids every second weekend. Is that what you mean? Please, Russell, don't be like that. I don't want a divorce, and I know you don't want to be separated from our children. You just have to understand that this is what I have to do, at least for a while. And how long is for a while? I asked. A year? 2 years? 5 years? I guess until I fade away, she answered. And then will you become my faithful, loving wife again? I think I've heard that before. I don't want to make a living from this, Russell. I won't go out on dates twice a week like Dion to make a living. I know we don't need the money. It'll only be once or twice a month. After the rest of the time, I will be devoted to you and your happiness. You are delusional, Diana, if you think that I will be happy with a woman of easy virtue as a wife. Diana reacted with anger, as always, when I called her a woman of easy virtue. I told you before, I am not a woman of easy virtue. I am a woman accompanying men for money. These are different things. Diana, I said, if you take a shovelful of horse shit, put it in a shoebox, package it up nicely, and tie it with a nice bow, it will still be horse shit when you open the box. You are right about one thing. You are not a woman of easy virtue. She does it for money. You're obviously doing this for fun. I don't want to be married to someone like that either. I know you're mad at me right now, Russell, but you'll change your mind, just like you did before. You will forgive me. I know that you love me, just as I love you, and we will succeed. Just wait and see. You're wrong about me again, Diana. I never forgave you. Moreover, I was a fool for not putting you out on the street when it happened in California. I won't make this mistake again. I'm going for a walk, I told her. Do not wait for me. The gloomy night seemed almost friendly. The fog and light drizzle suited my mood. This walk, like the one I took after learning about Diana's activities last year, gave me time to think. Last time I had a choice between divorce and forgiveness. This time the choice was between divorce and divorce. There were no other alternatives. The only question was how can I get out of this and avoid all the negative consequences. A straight divorce would almost certainly put me in a position similar to Gary's. I wouldn't mind it, except for the kids. I didn't want to be separated from my babies. The question then became what I needed to do to leave them. In current conditions, Diana was considered an ideal mother. The courts would never have granted me primary custody of the children under the current circumstances, even with her new profession. The question then became, what should I do to change the circumstances? This question led to the answer. Diana had to be discredited as an ideal mother. In fact, she had to be proven unfit. This led to the ultimate question, how do I do this? These reflections did not happen in a few minutes. It took hours. It was already after 2 o'clock in the morning when I returned home. I didn't go to bed with Diana. I went to Emily's room, took off my clothes, and went to her bed to sleep. The progress made in thinking was satisfactory, it seemed to me, for the moment. I slept well until early Saturday morning. I got up early, before Diana. Since we didn't have a real guest room for me to move into, I looked around the storage area in the basement. The large basement had its own entrance, a staircase, which made it semi-basement. The outside door opened onto a small, unused patio. For years we used it to store what eventually became trash. With a little effort and money, I thought I could turn it into a studio apartment. I spent over an hour taking measurements and making rough drawings. When I got upstairs, Diana was making coffee. She poured me a cup and said, "I missed you in bed last night." I took her cup of coffee and replied, "I will never sleep with you again. I know you're still hurt, Russell, but after the kids come back, you won't have another place to sleep." I made my intentions clear to her. I'm going to clean out the basement and turn it into an apartment. For now, I'll sleep there on a cot with my sleeping bag. "This is just stupid," she said. "You should sleep with me." "No more," I replied simply. "I'm sure you'll change your mind over time, dear, but do what you have to do now." With these words, Diana finished her coffee and went upstairs to prepare for her visit to the hairdresser. I saw her as she was leaving. She carried a rack of several dresses and a separate bag of shoes. I assumed that these were the clothes that Dion had given her, and that they would be used in her photo shoot. For me, I spent the entire day hauling boxes of stuff we never used from the basement to the curb. I called We Haul Junk to come pick it all up, and it was all gone by the end of the day. Meanwhile, I contacted a friend who was a contractor and told him about my plan. He arrived in the afternoon to inspect the basement. I explained to him what I needed: new vinyl flooring, a new ceiling with 2 ceiling fans with lighting, a walk-in closet, closets, shelving, and a small bathroom with a shower. About a third of the basement will be dedicated to storing things that are still useful to us. The contractor estimated the cost, and I agreed to pay it. He, in turn, said that he has a free team that can immediately begin work. My kids, of course, wondered why their dad wouldn't sleep with their mom. I explained as diplomatically as possible that mom and dad had disagreements, and we decided to sleep separately for some time. Both Diana and I tried to reassure them that our differences were nothing to do with them, and that we both still loved them just as much. As before, when we were with children, we played the polite role well and showed each other affection. In fact, Diana used our time with the children to be closer to me. I was the one pretending to show affection. 2 weeks later, my basement apartment was ready. I invited the kids to come down and see what I had done to the basement, and they approved. Moreover, they chose a small family room with a TV as their preferred location for their games. Friday night, the kids were in the basement when I got up to start cooking dinner. As soon as I entered the kitchen, I heard Diana coming down the stairs. I walked up to the hallway to ask if she wanted anything for dinner. Diana was dressed stunningly. She was wearing a black cocktail dress that only reached mid-thigh. The dress had a plunging neckline that easily showed off the top of her breasts. She was wearing 4-inch heels. Her makeup was flawless, and her bright red lipstick matched her nails. She looked sexier than ever. "I won't have dinner at home today," she said. "I have a date. I'll probably be back very late, so don't wait for me." I looked back to make sure the children had not left the basement. There weren't any. I turned my attention and my rage to Diana. I leaned close to her ear and said, "Don't ever dress like that in this house again. Don't ever let my children see you like this. If you're going to dress up for your client before you sleep with him, do it somewhere else. Rent yourself an apartment or dress up in a friend's apartment. Dress up in the car if you have to, but never here, never again. Do you understand me?" Diana was scared. She had never seen me so angry and cruel. She shook her head, indicating that she understood. "Sorry, Russell," she said in a hoarse voice. "I didn't mean to ignore your feelings like that. I didn't know it was so important to you." I didn't let her finish. I opened the door and pushed her out onto the porch. I picked up the bag she was carrying and threw it on the ground behind her before slamming the door in her face and locking it. I turned off the porch light. Through the stained glass door, I made out her figure. She stood on the porch for several minutes. Perhaps she was wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. I wasn't sure. A few minutes later, she left. Unfortunately, my plan to discredit Diana as a mother had to be long-term, probably for a year. During this time, I will have to live with her and the shame of being a knowledgeable cuckold. I will do this if it is necessary to divorce Diana and keep the children for myself. I developed a plan which was to make Diana seem unfit to raise children. To implement it, I needed 3 men of easy virtue who would pretend to be clients who wanted to date Diana. I knew that Diana was essentially looking for potential men for her harem. I needed 3 men who were handsome, had a great physique, and seemed very rich. My intention was to encourage Diana to choose these men as regular clients. The internet was the starting point in the search for men of easy virtue. They were usually attractive young men in their 20s and 30s, far too young. I needed men between the ages of 50 and 60. Another problem was their high price. They worked through an agency, just like women, and their services were prohibitively expensive in my opinion, although not as expensive as women's services. I had to rethink the problem. I needed adult film actors older, retired ones. I had no idea where to find them. Then I thought, I'll go to one of the gentlemen's clubs downtown. Perhaps I can get a lead or find contacts there. On Friday night, when Diana had a date, I called our nanny to watch the kids and went downtown to investigate. My goal was to be the first to visit the most prestigious club, ask some general questions, and form an opinion on how to find the men I needed. The first club I went to was Black Tie. I half expected it to be something like the diner I was used to as a college-town bachelor in my 20s. However, this was not the case. It was a first-class establishment, very large inside, well-equipped, and decorated in dark blue. Immediately, a beautiful, scantily clad girl who acted as hostess approached me, greeted me, and found me a secluded table. I noticed that there was an almost naked pole dancer on stage with a perfect body. I was mesmerized for a moment because I had never seen such a graceful pole dancer before. My attention was interrupted by another beautiful girl in a bikini. She was a waitress and took my drink order. After my drink arrived, I continued to watch the performance, which now featured another beautiful girl performing an acrobatic dance. I had almost forgotten why I came to the club when another barely covered girl came up to me and asked if I needed anything. My expression must have told her that I didn't really understand what anything meant. I assumed it meant everything except sex. Black Tie was too high-end an establishment to offer such basic services on site. She said that many men want a private dance, and we could go to a private room. She said it would cost $100 for 30 minutes of her time. I asked her name, and she said her name was Lee. I told her my name was Russell. Instead of a private dance for $100, I invited her to sit and talk to me for the same amount. Lee called the waitress over and whispered something in her ear. She then turned to me and said the amount would be added to my bill. "What do you want to talk about, Russell?" she asked. I told her what I needed. "I'm looking for 3 men to sleep with my wife." "You don't like to talk about small things, do you, Russell?" she answered. "Are you some kind of cuckold who likes to watch his wife sleep with other men?" I assured her that was not the case. "Actually, it's a little more complicated," I said. "I need 3 older, handsome men who will meet my wife from time to time and have sex with her. I thought older maybe retired actors might be a good choice, and I could get a lead on them at a place like this. Why actors? If your wife is attractive enough, you could probably find any man on the street who would want to sleep with her. Well, I said, I thought of porn actors because they're probably well-built, good-looking, and have a lot of experience with women. Plus, they have a little acting ability, which will be necessary. How much are you going to pay them? Lee asked. More than they would make in a movie for one sex scene, I replied, and I'll give them a bonus if they do a good job. Let me think about it, Lee said. I think our assistant manager, Phil McCleary, used to do adult films. He's over 50, but he still looks good and looks very respectable. Where can I find him? I asked, thinking that the typing process might be easier than I had imagined. Phil is not here today. It is usually open during the day when the club offers entertainment for businessmen at lunchtime. They often bring their clients here for lunch and shows. Also, Lee continued, Dewey, the bartender, was probably in the industry too. He and Phil are close friends. Actually, I think Phil hired Dewey. He's a nice guy too, dates a lot of the girls who work here, and is very popular with the ladies who come on Wednesdays for Ladies' Day. On this day, we only have performances by male dancers both during lunch and in the evening. I took out a pen and piece of paper and wrote down my name and contact information. I asked Lee to convey this to Phil and explain that I would like to speak with him and Dewey the following Wednesday afternoon. As Lee tucked the note into her revealing outfit, she commented, You seem like a good person, Russell. Apparently you're straight, good-looking, and outgoing. Why do you want these guys to sleep with your wife? Do you still love her? Talk to me in a few months, Lee, was all I said. I can't talk about it at the moment. As for loving my wife, I used to love her very much. On Wednesday, I left early for lunch, saying I would be gone for a few hours. The show was for ladies, and most of them sat at tables near the stage. There were several men in the place, mostly behind the bar, watching the Chippendale-style dancing and striptease. I sat down at the bar. There I looked around and found who I thought might be Phil standing at the end of the bar. He was an attractive man, perhaps around 55, who dressed well and looked very respectable with white hair and a white, thin mustache. I recognized Dewey behind the bar, making drinks for the half-naked men serving the ladies in the room. He was also very handsome for someone in his mid-50s. His tight vest showed that he had a good physique. I ordered a drink, and when it arrived, I left my seat and walked to the end of the bar. I introduced myself to Phil, and he said he had been expecting me. He continued that he was interested in what little Lee had told him about my desire to hire former actors. I asked him where we could talk. He told Dewey to watch the bar if needed, and that he would be in his office. He led me to his office on the second floor, which had a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the auditorium and stage. He asked me to sit down. When I sat down, he asked what was on my mind. I told him that I wanted 3 older men with experience in adult films to sleep with my wife. Now I went into details. I wanted them to pretend to be clients booking her through an agency. I wanted them to appear as very wealthy clients who treated her so well in terms of money and sex that she would try to entice them into regular meetings, about once every 2 weeks. I wanted them to treat her like a girl, treat her very well, and give her the best sex of her life. In addition, each of them had a role that they had to play in order to involve her in certain actions that the custody judge would consider inappropriate for the mother. I added, all your sex scenes will be recorded for use as leverage in the divorce proceedings. Phil admitted that he was married once, and that his wife left him for another man who was respected in society and did not belong to the adult film industry. I continued, Lee told me Dewey might be a good fit for the job. If that's the case, I need another person. I hope you can find someone who meets my requirements. And you will pay us for this? Asked Phil. Yes, I said. I will pay $100 an hour for your time with my wife, and I assume that the dates with her will last about 15 hours, from 6 in the evening until 9 in the morning the next day. That's $1,500 a date. In addition, I will cover your expenses. hotel room, entertainment, dinner, drinks, etc. Before I go into detail, I would like you, Dewey, and whoever you hire to meet for drinks. I can tell you everything I need from each of you at that time. I could always use $1,500 and a good night in bed, Phil said. Can I see a photo of your wife? I took out my wallet and showed him a photo of Diana. My God, said Phil, she is stunningly beautiful. This is starting to sound more and more attractive. Let me get Dewey here, and between us we can find a third party. Phil called Dewey into his office and briefly explained my proposal. When he said they needed one more person, Dewey thought for a minute and then made some suggestions. Apparently, they both knew the people they were talking about. Finally, they settled on a man named Dave Gray. I told them to contact Mr. Cosgray and then arrange a time when we could all meet for a few hours to discuss the entire scenario I had planned. Phil called a few days later and said we could meet on Saturday morning at the club. At this time, the club will be closed, and we will have enough time to discuss everything. That Saturday, ironically, before Diana got home from one of her late-night dates, I had already left the house and was on my way to Black Tie. I knocked on the club door, and Phil let me in. He led me to one of the tables in the hall. I noticed that Lee was there, but not at the table. She was wearing jeans and a sweater. At the table, I was introduced to Dave Gray. He was an attractive, bald man in his mid-50s who looked to be in good shape. Dewey motioned to Lee, and she brought the coffee pot to the table, along with cream and sugar and a plate of scones. She also placed a bottle of Bailey's Irish Cream in front of us and walked back to the bar. After a pleasant conversation, Phil asked me to describe my situation and outline my plan and their role in it. I started from the beginning when we learned that Dion broke her ankle and covered everything up to the current situation. I thought I had described what happened fairly without denigrating Diana too much, but all three gentlemen said they believed she was promiscuous and just looking for an excuse for her escapades. I then told them my plan to discredit Diana. Each of them had their own role. Phil must have been attracted to married women. He had to disrespect me in every possible way while he was with Diana, and she had to do the same, thinking that Phil would like it. Dewey was supposed to introduce Diana to illegal substances. Soon after, he had to show her how it improved their meetings. I asked if there would be a problem with purchasing illegal substances. All three men laughed and assured me that this would not be an obstacle. Finally, Dave had to play the role of a man who doesn't like children. I told each of my partners that I would give them more details and specific instructions on individual briefings. Also, some of their actions will no doubt depend on how previous meetings with Diana went. I intended to book hotel rooms. Once the rooms are ready, I will install audio and video recording devices in them that are activated by motion and voice. When they left the next morning, I picked up my equipment, transferred the recordings to the computer, and edited them to make Diana look as bad as possible. This included many videos of her sex scenes and selected dialogue snippets. I handed out photos of Diana along with descriptions of what she liked. I assured them that she was a very skilled bed partner and they would have fun at my expense. Everyone agreed that she was a great piece. Finally, I told them that I would arrange hotel rooms for them, all of which would be 5 stars. They all had to agree to be recorded, although I promised that the likelihood of these videos becoming public was minimal. To ambiguously assure them that they would not be implicated in the recordings, I told them that their faces would be completely pixelated. I continued that I wanted them to treat Diana very well, give her the guy experience. They had to take her to dances, to the theater, and to high-class parties. I was going to pay for the whole night at a rate of $100 an hour. I will provide a bank account into which they can debit the costs of hiring Diana through her agency. I will also give them money to give her as tips for being a great escort, which I think might further encourage her to date these guys regularly. This meant a lot of money for each of them, and they all agreed to it, especially considering what a beautiful and sexy woman Diana is. As a final incentive to do a good job, I told them that if my plan was successful, I would give each of them a bonus of $10,000 when I was granted a divorce on my terms. This plan will cost me a pretty penny. If it takes 4 dates with each gigolo to get the materials I need, the total cost would be $120,000, not including the $30,000 bonus promised to all of them. My financial mind calculated that if I divorced Diana and paid $5,000 a month in alimony and $3,000 a month in child support, then I would pay her $120,000 for 15 months. In a sense, this plan was about long-term savings. I opened a bank account for 3 members and provided them each with a debit card to use at the agency and to tip Diana. I put enough money in my account to pay for 1 date with Diana, plus some for incidentals. Of course, I didn't put in so much money that one of the 3 could steal a huge amount and disappear with it. I gave one-on-one briefings to Phil, Dewey, and Dave, explaining their roles to them. I wanted Diana to do certain things and say certain words that would incriminate her of various immoral and even illegal actions that I could use against her. When this was achieved, I considered the trap to be set. Phil was the first to approach the agency as a client. By filling out personal and financial information online and submitting his photo, he was verified and accepted. A day or 2 later, he said he wanted to spend the night with Diana. He was told it was available on the day he specified and asked to provide credit card information to pay the bill. Soon after, he was given Diana's cell phone number, provided by the agency. Phil waited until I arrived at black tie the next morning and called her. I listened as they got to know each other, discussed things like Phil's job, family background, interests, and so on. Of course, Phil's story was completely made up to convince Diana of his wealth. Much of what Diana said was also fiction. They discussed what they would like to do on their first date and set a time and place to meet. When the call ended, I told Phil that I would let him know what hotel and room I would book for him. As I walked out the door, I said, "Have fun." On the day of Phil's date with Diana, I checked into the Hilton. I was there at the time of registration to install the video and audio equipment purchased for this occasion. The next morning, when Phil told me that he and Diana had left the room to have breakfast, I went back into the room to get my equipment. Just out of curiosity, I went into the hotel cafe and, remaining unnoticed, saw them at a table. They held hands while finishing their coffee. I thought this might be a good sign that Diana had fallen in love with Phil and would want to get back together with him. When I had a couple of hours to spare, I looked through the recordings and copied them to my hard drive. I then edited the original video to focus on those actions and statements that showed Diana in the worst light. I noted that Phil was a master of seduction and Diana seemed to be thoroughly enjoying her time. She almost cried when he said that he enjoyed her company so much that he gave her a tip of $500 in cash. Over the next 2 weeks, Dewey and Dave also turned to Elegant Escort Agency as clients. Both were accepted. Throughout the time I was organizing and executing my plan, I stayed in contact with Gary. He actually suggested several ideas that I implemented into the program. After Diana's first date with Phil, Gary gave me information that would prove very helpful in the months that followed. Before his divorce, he spied on Dion using electronic devices. He also tapped her phone. Although he had long since stopped monitoring her calls, he said the bug on her phone was still active, and it was able to record all of her conversations, emails, and text messages. He assumed that Diana and Diana would communicate frequently about Diana's early escapades as an escort, since they were both now in the same business. He offered to monitor any calls between his ex-wife and Diana if I was interested. I said that I would be very interested, and that this information could be very useful to me. He happily agreed. According to copies of Diana's text messages, emails, and conversations, the first few dates were not very successful. One client was very old and just wanted her to be a nice addition to some gathering. He'd only used her for 4 hours, hardly worth her time. He didn't have sex with her. Another older gentleman was very fat and disgusting to her. She had to play a lot to make him feel like a real man. Then she talked about Phil. More precisely, I admired him. Handsome, well-built, charismatic, and rich. Besides, he was a great lover. Finally, he left her overnight in a luxury hotel and even gave her a tip of $500. She made over $8,000 in one night. She really hoped she could keep him as a regular customer. The plan worked. Dewey was the next to contact Diana for a date. Unlike Phil, Dewey wanted to take her to the dance. The agency advised Diana that dancing should be her forte, but this was not the case. She hasn't danced for a long time. Dion reminded her that I was a great dancer because my mom was a dance teacher and taught me just about everything about social dancing: swing, cha-cha, hustle, foxtrot, waltz, etc. Deanna suggested that Diana make me go to the dance with her to brush up on the basics, learn a few steps, and learn to follow the man who leads. When Diana first suggested going to the dinner and dance, I was going to say no. Then I thought about it and decided that I wanted her to have a good time with Dewey, so a dance lesson might be good for me. And so it turned out. Diana offered to pay for the evening, but I said I wouldn't let her pay with dirty money. It hurt her feelings. "I thought you were already used to my activities," she said. "I think it's time for you to return to our bedroom. I miss you at night. I miss making love with you." "Well, at least you're having fun every couple of weeks on your dates. I have to stay home and take care of our children and myself. Besides, I told you the day you announced that you would become an escort that I would never sleep with you again." I meant it. She still didn't believe it. She said that she knows that I love her and I will return to her sooner or later. Diana suggested a trendy lounge with a good band and a variety of music. We made a reservation for 9 p.m. when the band started playing. Before this time, the DJ played music. The place was quite crowded, but since we had reservations, we were immediately shown to a table near the dance floor. I noticed several groups of women who appeared to be having a bachelorette party. There were a lot of single guys who seemed to want to hang out at the bar. It was an upscale dating bar. After our first drink order was served, Diana wanted to dance. I told her no, it wasn't dance music. It was something I called bebop, the type of music where you just move around and never touch your partner. I could do it, but I came here to dance. 2 or 3 songs later, the band played Sweet Caroline. It was one of my favorite slow swing songs. I asked Diana to dance, and we went out onto the dance floor. I showed her how we hold each other when swinging. She remembered a lot of what we danced many years ago. I started with the basic steps. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, step back. We practiced the basic steps for a few minutes before I raised my left hand, indicating that she should make an inward turn. Then there was an outer turn. I was a good leader and specialized in dance steps that I could easily guide my partner through. I avoided difficult steps that required preliminary preparation of the partner. I also knew enough steps to not have to repeat them during a 3-minute song. While the music was playing, many people made room for us in the center of the dance floor and watched us as we put on a show. When the music ended, we were applauded. After a few more songs, the cha-cha started playing. Again, I reminded Diana of the basic steps and then walked her through a series of movements that, although they seemed difficult, were actually very simple. Again, our audience applauded us when we finished. While we were catching our breath and relaxing with our drinks, another swing song started playing. I was ready to dance again when a very beautiful woman of about 35 approached us. She was dressed for an evening of dancing, and I recognized her from a group of 4 women seated at one of the large round tables. "Excuse me," she said directly to Diana. "Do you mind if I dance with your husband? He's apparently the only man here who really knows how to dance." Diana looked at me in surprise when I said, "I would be flattered." I took the woman's hand and led her to the center of the dance floor. On the way, I introduced myself as Russell, and she said her name was Betty. Once on the dance floor, I calmly explained how we hold each other in the V position and how we hold our hands. I then showed her the basic step and asked her to practice with me for a few seconds. Then I walked her, keeping the rhythm with the music. Before the end of the song, I did a few turns and a step called Around the World. It was a very simple step, but it looked impressive to those not familiar with the swing. When the music ended, I took her back to her table. All her friends applauded her and told her how good she looked. She thanked me and asked if it wasn't too intrusive if we could dance again. I told her that I would be happy to dance with her and her friends anytime. I returned to our table with a satisfied smile on my face. Diana seemed a little annoyed. "You had a good time?" she asked. "Very good," I replied. "This is a nice group of women. They seem to be tired of dancing with men who don't really know how to dance. They love the twists and turns of the swing. They'll probably like hustle and cha-cha too." The next few dances were a mixture of swing, cha-cha, hustle, and foxtrot. I was good at all of them and could make my partner look good too. I especially liked hustle. Like the swing, there is a basic step and many other steps for decoration. After 2 or 3 dances with Diana, I noticed that she was tired. She was wearing the wrong dancing shoes. I did, however, bring my suede-soled dancing shoes. Just as Diana went to the restroom, the second woman in Betty's group came up to me for a swing dance. I agreed with pleasure. I was still dancing when Diana returned to the table. My new partner was Helen. She walked me back to our table and said she hoped Diana didn't mind that she asked me to dance. Diana feigned politeness and said she didn't mind. Before Helen left the table, she said, "Since we spend so much time with your husband, perhaps you would like to join us at the table, unless you want to spend this evening alone." I knew Diana didn't want to join the group of girls for their night out, but I gladly accepted the invitation. I took our drinks and moved to a table with a group of women. Diana followed me. When they made room for us, they introduced themselves. Besides Betty and Helen, there were Lori and Jerry. They were all beautiful women in their 30s. They were so friendly that Diana began to feel comfortable with them. They weren't particularly interested in meeting men. They just wanted to have a good time. In fact, now that I was at the table, they were grateful that many of the young men who had previously pestered them to dance had now retreated, although not completely. Even Diana was invited to dance by several young men. After we all talked about our main backgrounds, jobs, and so on, we all felt comfortable with each other. I still danced with Diana most of the time, but when a swing song played, I gave dance lessons to our table companions. Before we left, I suggested that if they wanted to learn to dance, they should try taking inexpensive group lessons at a local dance studio. Among the things I learned was that all the women were married except Jerry, who was recently divorced. Also, their husbands trusted them completely and often joined them on bachelorette parties. They always went home no later than 10:30. Their meetings took place once or twice a month. I told them that I would be happy to dance with all of them again if we happened to meet at a club in the future. Helen took my contact and promised to call me when they decided to have a bachelorette party again. On the way back home, Diana seemed a little angry. "What's happened?" I asked. "This evening was supposed to be just the two of us. You shouldn't have had a relationship with 4 women who went out without their husbands," she said. "First of all, Diana, I gave you all the dance lessons you could handle. So much so that you complained of pain in your legs. I wouldn't doubt it on those shoes. If you really want to dance, buy yourself dancing shoes with heels no higher than 2 inches. "But you seemed so into them," Diana replied. This made me angry, and I showed it. "Let's figure it out, Diana. You're angry because I danced 7 dances with 4 women with whom I became friends and whose company I enjoyed. Meanwhile, you meet strange men 2 or 3 times a month and have sex with them all night, while I sit at home with our children and come up with excuses for you. Is this what irritates you?" Diana was silent for a while. "Did you give them your phone number?" she asked. "No," I replied. "Helen asked for mine and I gave it to her. She said she would call me when they decided to have another bachelorette party. Of course, she thought you and I would meet them, but next time I'll probably go alone, especially if you're on a date with one of your clients." "Damn it, Russell," Diana said angrily. "These are not clients. These are clients." I simply replied, "Remember what I said about gift-wrapped horse shit?" Still a little angry, I said, "Just so you know, after you decided to become a highly paid prostitute, I decided that I could date and sleep with any woman I wanted. I haven't taken advantage of this opportunity yet because I didn't want to stoop to your level. However, I still see it as an alternative that I can resort to without any guilt. Remember, what's true for the goose is true for the gander. I never thought that you would decide to cheat on me, she replied. I thought my love would be enough for you. That's how I thought about you. Apparently, I was wrong. I continued, I'm not immune to desire, and neither are you. I realized a long time ago that relationships with random women were the price I had to pay for a happy marriage. From time to time, there were women who made it clear that they were not against an affair. Until recently, I never considered this as something I wanted to do. I rewatched it recently. Diana was silent the whole way home. Diana went on several dates before she met Dewey. Just like their first dates, they weren't as successful compared to Phil. These were short dates that didn't bring in a lot of money. She admitted to Dion that Phil spoiled her for other men. Dion responded that she has to tolerate the idiosyncrasies of her clients. After all, they didn't ask for escorts without reason for no reason. Her task is to make them feel like real men, regardless of their inclinations and oddities. Then she had a date with Dewey. Dewey was not Phil. He was completely different, and he gave Diana as much pleasure as Phil did, just in his own style. He was also handsome, well-built, charming, rich, and skilled in bed. And he loved to dance. He was a good leader, and she could keep up with him. By then, she already had her dancing shoes. She told Dion that he said he wanted to see her again and gave her a generous tip. Additionally, she said Dewey introduced her to illicit substances, and she discovered that she enjoyed the experience. Dion was jealous. She said she had to go through dozens of men before she could establish a set of regular clients who both liked her and paid her well. Diana then had a date with Dave. After their first intercourse, as they lay in bed together, Dave admitted that he had a deep interest in something. Diana was a natural at fulfilling her clients' fantasies. Before their first date ended, Diana tried to help him with his weirdness. It was strange for Diana, but the sex was amazing for her, and she decided that it was worth pursuing a relationship with Dave. Dave said he would definitely invite her again. Dave also gave her a $1,000 bonus for her work. Diana tried dating other men besides Phil, Dewey, and Dave, but they were all losers compared to the 3 men who captured her attention. She wanted to see them more often, but had to limit her time as a chaperone to about 2 together per month. Diana formed her own pack. Meanwhile, I started going out alone. Betty called me one day and asked if I wanted to meet her and her husband at the same lounge where we first met. She said Jerry would be there too. I agreed with pleasure. Diana had a date on Friday that lasted until Saturday morning. On Saturday afternoon, she wanted to know if we could spend the evening together. I told her that I had already made plans for the evening and that I was going to dance alone. That evening, I came downstairs in my dark blue sports jacket, gray trousers, and tie. I was carrying my bag with my dancing shoes. I told her I'd be back around 11 p.m. I left without kissing her or telling her I loved her. She was clearly angry, but she couldn't say anything that didn't sound hypocritical. I met Betty and her husband Chris and Jerry at a dance club. The 2 ladies were dressed very stylishly sexy, but not provocatively. Betty and Jerry were surprised that Diana was not with me. I told them I would explain later, after a few dances and drinks. Betty was eager to dance with me so she could show Chris the swing. She had been wanting to start dance lessons with her husband for a long time and wanted him to see what she was telling him about. Again, I made it easy for her to follow me and used simple but effective dance steps to make her look good. Likewise, I danced with Jerry several times. We danced not only swing, but also cha-cha, hustle, and even waltz. While we were catching our breath as the band played a song for a free dance, Jerry asked me again why Diana wasn't with me. Without going into surgical details, I told them that I was going to divorce her soon because she was an escort and slept with other men for money. I am only staying with her until I can make arrangements to retain primary custody of my children. My new friends were all sympathetic, especially Jerry, who had been divorced for almost 2 years. Personally, she told me that divorce is a tragic event. She was lucky, however, that she had a trust fund and did not need alimony or support from her ex-husband. Still, she said being a single parent is hard work. She has 2 children, a boy and a girl, about the same age as my children. Betty and Chris both noticed the growing attraction between Jerry and I and suggested, since she came with them, that maybe I would like to take her home. I agreed with pleasure. On the way to Jerry's townhouse, I again noted how beautiful and sexy she was. In the car, her dress rose to mid-thigh, revealing her curved, muscular calves. The low neckline of the dress showed that she had full breasts of a C+ or D size. When we arrived at her house, I was determined not to be too pushy. Jerry invited me for a cup of tea, and I accepted. Inside, I met the nanny, an elderly woman, who left a few minutes after we arrived. Before she left, she assured Jerry that the children had behaved perfectly and gone to bed on time. Jerry let me stand at the door of the children's room while she put them to bed and kissed them goodnight. They looked like little angels. Jerry told me that her children were the only good thing that came out of her marriage. Her husband was abusive, and she had a restraining order against him. He rarely saw his children, and then only at supervised meetings. Over a cup of tea, I told her that if it weren't for my marriage problems, I probably would have proposed to her. However, until I am free, we can only be friends without benefits. She said she felt the same way and that she needed all the friends she could have. Before I left, I offered that at some point we might meet our children and see how they get along. Perhaps I suggested we could go to a park or a fair and just spend time together. Jerry thought it was a great idea and told me to let her know I could arrange it. It so happened that I was invited to a BBQ pool party at Chris and Betty's house. It was Saturday, and I left home with the children before Diana, who had spent a long night out of the house, woke up. Chris and Betty warmly welcomed me and my children to the party. Helen and Lori were also there with their husbands. My husband said that they had already heard a lot about me. I met Jerry and her children and introduced mine at the same time. I invited them to jump into the pool with the rest of the children. They spent the entire day at the pool with Jerry's kids and seemed to get along great with each other. Between the notes I took, the reports from the 3 men, and the information relayed to me by Gary, I had a good understanding of all of Diana's actions and thoughts as an attendant. Second and third dates with 3 men proceeded according to my instructions. Phil continued to escalate his disrespect towards me, and soon Diana was doing the same without any prompting from Phil. Illicit substances became a standard part of sex between Dewey and Diana. On their third date, Dewey took it to the next level. Dave continued to pretend that he was weird. He intensified their role-playing by having Diana wear clothes and wigs that reminded him of one woman or another. Diana played with and even enhanced Dave's fantasies. Diana found it a bit sick, but she became a consummate professional at pleasing her clients by responding to their tendencies and eccentricities. It was a small price to pay for the wonderful sex and excitement and money she received in return. After 4 months, I decided that I had everything I needed. A lot of time was spent editing and re-editing the video to ensure it flowed smoothly, showing Diana as she had become and emphasizing her behavior in the role playing games she felt were necessary to please her pack. She told Dion everything, and I could read her mind thanks to the information Gary provided. She was content to only date Phil, Dewey, and Dave. She said she didn't want to date anymore because those 3 men were all she could stand dating 2 or 3 times a month. She knew that taking more risks would jeopardize her family life to an unacceptable degree. As she said, she still hoped that I would adapt to her lifestyle and we could be a loving couple again. All this time I saw Jerry. We remained good friends and avoided what could be called relationships. Although we were holding hands and hugging, it was completely innocent, and we both preferred that at the moment. However, we enjoyed films, theater, ballet, and even opera for several months. We were even able to spend time together with our children, who were now best friends. I had one last request for Phil. On their 4th date, he said he wanted to sleep with her in their marital bed. Diana refused, but Phil was persistent. "I'll pay you $1,000 for a night in your bed," Phil offered. I cannot do it. It would be unthinkable, Diana replied. Why, Phil continued, you have told me many times that you despise your husband, that he has not satisfied you for many years, and that you stay with him only because he earns well and provides you with a comfortable life. $2,000 then, Phil continued to persuade. I don't know, Diana seemed thoughtful. $5,000 for one night in your marital bed, Phil said. Okay, I'll do it. I will spend the night with you in my home in my $5,000 marital bed. But, she added, Russell rarely goes away alone for a night or a weekend. I'll wait for the opportunity, Phil said. Thanks to Gary, I found out that Diana wanted to do this. She told Dion, I don't really need the money, but I want to do this for my own satisfaction. I'm going to be $5,000 a night escort. A week later, I told Diana that I had arranged to spend the next Thursday through Sunday at our lake house. Since the children did not study for 2 days due to teacher conferences, they will not miss classes. I asked Jerry if she wanted to hang out with us. She happily agreed, and we arranged everything. I told Phil to set up a date with Deanna for Friday night and gave him a few additional instructions. At the country house, I explained to Jerry that I would have to return home late Friday evening with the children. I apologized for interrupting the weekend, but told her to stay until Sunday and enjoy time with her children. On Friday afternoon, I tired the children out with active activities. I wanted them to be sound asleep when I got home at 11 p.m. At 10:30, Phil sent me a quick message that he and my wife were heading upstairs. I secretly parked the car and avoided using the automatic garage door, which would have made too much noise. Then, leaving the children sleeping in the car, I quietly entered the house. Everything was prepared as I asked. On the glass surface of the coffee table was a bottle of illegal substances and evidence of its use. Diana's shoes, dress, and stockings were on display. I walked back to the car and, as carefully as I could, picked up each of my children and carried them into the house, placing them on the couch in front of the coffee table. I took photographs. Finally, it was my turn to play my part. I quietly walked up the carpeted stairs to the bedroom. The door was closed, as I asked Phil. As quietly as I could, I opened the door and announced myself loudly. Diana, we're home, I said. Then, feigning surprise and indignation, I continued, What is going on here? And turned on the light. Diana, what the hell are you doing with your client in our bed? Diana screamed, Oh God, no, it cannot be true. Phil pulled away from Diana and interjected, as if according to the script, You said your husband wouldn't be home until Sunday. Dean replied, I don't know why he's here. It should be at the lake house. I got sick and came home early. With the children, they're downstairs. No, 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 exclaimed Deanne. They can't see me like that. Meanwhile, I opened my closet, pulled out my Louisville slugger, and started waving it around threateningly. Phil played the coward. Look, man, I'm really sorry. You weren't supposed to be here. I never wanted to meet you face to face. I know you're angry, but don't do anything you might regret later. You and your wife should perhaps work this out between you. Just let me out of here. Put on your pants and shirt and leave. Be quiet. My children sleep on the sofa. I'm leaving here, he said. I followed him to the bedroom door. Once we were out of Dean's sight, he smiled and gave me the OK sign with his thumb and forefinger. I smiled back and gave him a thumbs up. In the bedroom, I continued to play my role. I told her what a low and corrupt person she was and asked what made her bring one of her clients to our house to have sex in our marital bed. Dean replied that he offered her a lot of money to have sex with her in our bed. And you tell me that you are not a woman of easy virtue, is all I said with a very disgusted voice. I told Dean I couldn't look at her anymore. I told her to stay in the bedroom for the rest of the night while I put our kids to bed and cleaned up the illicit substances in the living room. Oh God, she said again. I completely forgot them. I didn't know what you were using, I said, although I knew about it from the very beginning. I still continued to play my role. I put the children to bed. They didn't wake up during the whole incident upstairs. I then collected all the evidence and put it in a plastic bag in case it was needed as evidence in the future. When I returned to the master bedroom, I saw that Dean had cleaned herself up, combed her hair, and put on her nightgown and robe. I told her I was going to sleep downstairs in my basement apartment. We'll talk in the morning. Dean wanted me to come into the bedroom to explain how and why she had gotten to this point. I told her I would never set foot in the master bedroom again except to grab my clothes, and I would never sleep in that bed again. It was true. However, I returned to the bedroom a few days later to retrieve the recording devices I had hidden there. The next morning, I got up early and woke the children. "Get your things," I said. "We'll head back to the lake as soon as we've had breakfast." Dean must have heard me making coffee in the kitchen. She came down to talk to me. I told her I was still too angry to say anything. Besides, I said that I didn't want to be around her, and that I was taking the kids back to our cabin and wouldn't be back until Sunday night. When the kids came downstairs, they hugged Mom and started telling her what a great time they were having at the lake with Dad's friend Jerry and her 2 kids. This immediately caught Dean's attention. "Who is Jerry?" she asked me sharply. I reminded her, "You met her once when we went dancing. She was at the table with Betty, Helen, and Lori." "And now you spend the weekend with her at our house?" she asked me. "Jerry and I became good friends. I am also friends with other ladies' husbands. We went dancing together, and they invited me to their various events. And before you ask, at the cabin I slept in one bedroom and Jerry slept in the other. The children happily slept in their sleeping bags in the attic and in front of the fireplace. So you're still the only one in the family who committed treason." Having said this, I told the children to go to the car. They weren't thrilled about the 3-hour drive to the lake, but they were looking forward to playing with Jerry's kids again. I spent a lot of time over the next few days editing videos with Dean and her clients. I left out the juicy bits and removed any mention of what Phil, Dewey, or Dave encouraged her to do. The fragments that I saved also contained the most damning audio recordings of her statements. From 15 to 20 hours of video, I made about 2 hours of finished DVDs. I went to a professional video store and had them transcribe the audio to text for a lot of money. They also took about a dozen 8-inch by 10-inch photographs of Dean with each of her lovers. At the same time, I received information from Gary about Dean's conversations with Diana. It seems that Dean doubted whether she could continue working as an escort. She realized that I was very angry with her and that I was not adapting to her lifestyle as much as she thought. Diana regretted that she really missed Gary and their life together. She suggested that Dean stop her escort services at least for a while and get her marriage back on solid ground. She then added, "I know you made a lot of money, but you really aren't in it for the money like I am. You just like sex and adventure. You can still do these things. Phil or Dewey or any of your other contacts will be happy to be with you for free. Next time, just don't let Russell find out about it. Just have casual flings and keep it a secret. Maybe a one-off afternoon meeting while Russell is at work." Dean agreed. "That sounds like a good option for now. I will leave the agency and tell Russell that I have decided that being an escort has been more damaging to our marriage than I thought. I will behave the way he wants. I will be a good wife and mother. I hope, like after returning from California, he will gradually forgive me and we will be happy together again. Then I will decide how I feel about any additional activities." Diana supported Dean's plan. "Trust my experience, your marriage should be your most important priority. In a few years, I'll be too old to be valuable as a chaperone. The kids will have gone off to live their own lives, and I'll be left alone with no one to grow old with." A few weeks ago, I contacted a lawyer who came highly recommended to me. Her name was Talia Starling. I described my situation to her and told her that I intended to divorce my wife for adultery, but I wanted to retain custody of the children. Without giving her any indication of my plan to discredit Dean, I simply said that I hoped to prove that Dean was an unworthy mother. Talia laid out all the considerations that I already knew, such as division of property, alimony, and child support, etc. I gave her all the financial information she needed, assets, properties, retirement accounts, etc. I told her I would return when I was ready to take action. When I returned to Talia the second time, I had evidence against Dean. I explained that I had obtained video and audio recordings of Dean with several of her clients. Talia was suspicious of my source, but continued to study the videos and transcripts. She stated that this evidence was not allowed in court because it was obtained without her permission. I replied that I knew that, but I wanted to use them in a different way. I didn't want Dean to be made out to be a cheater, and I didn't want the world to know that I had been a knowledgeable cuckold for over a year. Most of all, I didn't want my children to suffer the consequences of a messy divorce. 2 days after Gary reported the conversation between Dean and her sister, Dean approached me, just as I expected. I just came downstairs after putting the kids to bed and kissing them goodnight. Dean sat at the dining table with a glass of wine poured for each of us. "Russell, if I may, I would like to talk to you," she purred. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked, as if I didn't know. "I want to talk about us and our marriage. I know that you are very unhappy with me because of my work. At the time I thought you could get used to it, but that didn't happen. I now understand that my actions created a gap between us and seriously damaged our marriage. I believe the only reason you stayed in the house is because you love our children too much to ever be separated from them. You can never live without them, no matter what." "Go on," I said, taking a sip of wine. I could almost see the script she was reading in her mind. "I want to fix everything between us. I know my actions have angered you, and I'm going to stop this. I will return to what you want me to be. Your best friend and companion, your lover and devoted mother to our children. You, Gina, Lucy, and Rory will be my only priorities." "That would be a start," I said, not showing the enthusiasm she had hoped and expected. "I terminated my contract with the agency. I won't go on dates anymore, except with you. And I don't want you to communicate anymore without me. Tomorrow night, I think we should go on a date together, like we did when we first got married. Have your mom pick up the kids from school. Then we'll go out to dinner at a nice restaurant, dance, and have a few drinks. Come home, and you can make passionate love to me." I didn't bother reminding her that I never wanted to touch her again, no matter how beautiful her body was. Instead, I said, "Let me think about what you said, and we'll talk tomorrow." "Okay," she replied. "We'll talk tomorrow before our date. I'll go and buy a new dress especially for this occasion, something hot but not as provocative as my other dresses." Dean was about to wake up and face his worst nightmare. I contacted Talia and arranged for her to come to my house the next day. She agreed to the appointed time and said that she would come with her partner. Talia arrived with her friend at 15. Dean hadn't returned from shopping yet, but I expected her soon. Since most of the upcoming conversation would be led by Thalia, I gave her a seat at the head of our 8-seat dining table. Her friend sat next to her, and I took a seat at the other end of the table with a double shot of spiced rum and my laptop in front of me. Dean returned around 4 p.m. Upon entering, she was delighted with the clothes she had purchased. "I found the most beautiful black cocktail dress, Russell. You'll love it on me." And I bought matching black high heels with diamonds. At that moment, she noticed 2 women sitting at the dining table. "What's going on, Russell? Who are your friends?" "Sit down, Dean. We need to talk." I took her to the central chair on the side of the table, opposite Thalia's friend. "Dean, let me introduce you to Talia Starling. She's my lawyer, my divorce lawyer." Dean was shocked and plopped down in her chair. A glass of her favorite wine was already standing in front of her. "Divorce?" Dean said. "I thought we already discussed this. We agreed that there would be no divorce because of what you might lose." "Everything has changed," I replied. "I'll let Miss Starling explain everything." At that moment, I took my place at the other end of the table, where a double portion of spiced rum was waiting for me. Talia wasted no time on formalities. "Mrs. Dawson, your husband is filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery and extreme mental cruelty." "This can't be true," Dean sighed. "I love my husband, and he loves me. I know it." That may be true, Mrs. Dawson, but nevertheless he wants to end this marriage. Dean came to her senses and retorted, he can use infidelity as a reason for divorce, but as far as I understand, this does not matter in court regarding the division of property and custody. Thalia continued, normally this might be true, Mrs. Dawson, however. Mr. Mrs. Dawson believes that there are aggravating circumstances that override normal divorce protocols. Dean hesitated, but finally asked, what are these circumstances? Thalia continued to be straightforward. Mr. Dawson obtained video and audio recordings of several men with whom you had contact as part of your activities as an escort. He believes these records will support his allegations in the divorce and will greatly impact the division of property and custody. Records. He can't have records. Dean continued her challenge. This is all a bluff to get me to give in to your demands, whatever they are. Thalia pulled out 3 large envelopes from her briefcase. Selecting the first one, she pulled out an 8 by 10-inch color photograph. Perhaps this will convince you that we have the records we claim. Want to see more? Dean was shocked. How? Who could have taken these pictures? It doesn't matter. What matters is that we have over 4 hours of video and audio recordings of your dating activities. With that said, Thalia took out the contents of each envelope and arranged them into 3 piles on the envelopes. She took 2 DVDs from the first stack. These are recordings of sex you had with your clients. She then held up a stack of 5 or 6 8 by 10-inch photographs. These are selected photographs of you having various types of sex with your clients. Third, Thalia picked up a stack of stapled papers. This is a transcript of some of your conversations with men you dated. However, Dean said, not as confident as she had started, cheating doesn't count in divorce proceedings. Dean looked at me with a pleading look in her eyes. Please, Russell, don't do this to us. I love you. I've always loved it. I know I hurt you, but I thought we could get through this. I have already terminated my ties with the agency. They removed my photos from their website. We can go back to the way things were before. No way, I replied coldly. Thalia took control of the conversation again. Let me introduce you to my partner. This is Judge Janet Collier. She served as a family court judge for over 20 years until she retired. She is here to give you her opinion on what she has learned from the recordings and transcripts. Mrs. Dawson, Judge Collier began, I have reviewed the video of your actions with the 3 men who were presented to me and read all the transcripts. These men were identified only as Mr. X, Mr. Y, and Mr. Z. As for Mr. X, the judge continued, he seemed to have a predilection for sex with married women and did everything he could to humiliate their husbands. Moreover, it seems that you fully supported him in everything. I counted over 50 times where you called your husband a wimp or something like that. Dean looked at me and pleaded, Russell, believe me, I was just playing a role. It didn't mean anything. I didn't answer. Instead, he simply raised his hand and waved it, as if to say, I don't want to hear that. Dean started crying. Why are you doing this to me, Russell? Please stop. At that moment, tears appeared in my eyes, which I quickly wiped away before they ran down my face. I steeled myself for what I knew was coming. Let's move on to information about Mr. Game. Apparently, he likes to use illegal substances and introduced you into this world. Your use of controlled substances is a misdemeanor for which you face up to a year in prison and a fine. Simple possession of a controlled substance is a criminal offense. However, the fact that you exchanged tips equivalent to money makes you guilty of trading in it. In addition, when you encourage Mr. Doe X and Mr. Kazi to use controlled substances, you become guilty of distribution, for which you face up to 20 years in prison. Oh my God, Dean exclaimed. I had no idea. It seems so common for Mr. Game to use this to enhance our meetings. I didn't know. Finally, let's talk about Mr. Zeta. This is a particularly disturbing part of your meetings. Please, Russell, Dean cried, tell me you didn't see these tapes. At this point, I pressed Enter on the laptop and turned the screen towards Dean. She screamed when she saw the video. This was more than enough to prove that I had the records I was talking about. "I saw everything, Dean," I said, shaking my head as if it were incredible. "I've been watching these videos for months." "Please, no more, Russell," she begged. "Turn it off." I closed the laptop lid and looked at Talia and Judge Collier. "We're not done yet, Mr. Dawson," Judge Collier continued. "There is another aspect of these records that you should be aware of. On your penultimate date with Mr. Pankid X, he offered you money for sex in your marital bed. At first, he offered $1,000. You did not accept this offer. In the end, he offered $5,000 to, and let me quote him exactly, sleep with you in your marital bed. You replied that you would do this, although your husband does not often go away on weekends. Conveniently for you, Mr. Dawson had planned a weekend during which he was going to take your children to your lake house. You took advantage of this time to invite Mr. X to your home for sex. Escorts often tell me that their clients pay for their time, but the sex is free. However, here we have an explicit offer of sex for money. This is a clear offense in our state. You are guilty, Mrs. Dawson. Another disturbing thing about your date with Mr. X in your home is that your children were home while you were having illicit sex. Moreover, there is evidence that you were using illegal substances in the living room when the children returned home. Judge Collier put down the papers she was referring to and looked at Dean. "Mrs. Dawson, if I were the judge in your divorce case and learned about your sexual activities as a married woman, how poorly you treated your husband, your illegal use of illicit substances, role-playing, and your activities as a woman of ease behavior, I would have a very difficult time awarding you primary custody of your children in a divorce case. In fact, I would probably deny you access to your children except under supervision." Dean was overwhelmed by what she was facing. She turned to me with a request for help written all over her face. I simply pointed to Thalia at the other end of the table. "Mrs. Dawson," she began, "to be fair, you should know that these recordings are not admissible in court because they were made without your knowledge or consent. Even transcripts are not allowed, as they are the product of illegal recordings." Dean breathed a sigh of relief, but it was premature. Thalia continued, "However, nothing prevents me from subpoenaing Mr. X, eager and set to testify on these same facts. This will be an open testimony that will become public domain." It was actually a bluff. If Dean had had any kind of lawyer, he probably would have understood the whole scheme, and in the end, Phil, Dewey, and Dave would have to admit that I put them up to it. Dean looked defeated. "What do you want, Russell?" "I want a divorce, Dean," I said decisively. "I don't want to be married to a woman of easy virtue. I don't want my children to be raised like this. I'm tired of being a cuckold. And now, with information about your immoral actions, I intend to destroy you. Your family and friends will know how badly you treated me and how disrespectful you were to our marriage. The police will be notified that you are a woman of easy virtue and accepted money for this. The authorities find out that you are involved in trafficking illegal substances. You will be publicly exposed and shamed for the disgusting person you have become." "I can't believe you're doing this to me, Russell," Dean said sadly. "I thought you loved me." I replied, "I thought you loved me too. Looks like we were both wrong." Talia chimed in, "Really, Mr. Dawson doesn't want to embarrass you, himself, or subject your children to a messy divorce over cheating. He is willing to offer you an alternative divorce agreement based on irreconcilable differences under certain conditions." "I don't understand," Dean said, not fully understanding what was being suggested to her. Talia continued, "Mr. Dawson would prefer a divorce based on irreconcilable differences. There will be no public mention of your indecent activities in this divorce. He won't post videos, transcripts, or photos unless you agree to his terms. In fact, he will destroy all evidence of your immoral and illegal actions 1 year after the divorce is finalized." "What conditions?" Dean asked, sobbing. "First," Thalia began listing, "you have to leave the house within a week. Mr. Dawson has arranged for you to stay in a Marriott extended stay apartment for 1 month at his own expense. You will then sign a quitclaim deed, relinquishing your financial interest in the home and the lake cabin. In return, you will keep all the money you earn as an escort, which is estimated to be over $90,000 at this time. In addition, Mr. Kennedy Dawson will share the family's investments equally with you, with the exception of the college fund, which will be retained for the benefit of your children. There will be no alimony, child support, or other forms of compensation between you. With respect to child custody, you will agree to joint custody with Mr. Dawson, with Mr. Dawson having primary custody. Although your legal days as a secondary caregiver will be every other weekend, holidays, and birthdays, and 6 weeks in the summer, Mr. Dawson will give you free access to the children at any reasonable time, provided that your male friends do not become involved. In fact, Mr. Dawson would welcome opportunities for you, him, and the children to spend time together during important family events such as Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, birthdays, and so on. Give up my children, Dean sighed. Whether the divorce is due to infidelity or irreconcilable differences, Talia explained, Mr. Dawson intends to file a claim for custody of the children. You have no choice in the matter. He has more than enough evidence to prove that you are an unworthy mother and should not have primary custody of the children. Talia continued, Mr. Dawson will give you a week to consult with a lawyer. You may take the photographs we have provided to you as a reminder of the evidence of your inappropriate behavior. The video and transcripts will remain under Mr. Dawson's complete control. I intervened. If you try to challenge my divorce terms on the basis of irreconcilable differences, I will completely revoke this proposal. I'll file a lawsuit for treason, and I wouldn't be surprised if the videos end up on the internet. Dean was clearly shaken by the consequences of the divorce due to infidelity. Russell, she said, I can't believe this is happening to me. I always thought that we would be married forever, that I would die in your arms. I replied, you loved your weekends with other people's sex more than our future together. But what will I live on? Dean asked. Obviously, $90,000 and even half of our investment will not be enough to survive for more than a few years. Talia took the floor again. Mrs. Dawson, let me remind you that since you became a high-paid escort, you have earned over $90,000 in just 18 dates in 6 months. That's an average of $5,000 per date. If you met once a week instead of twice a month, your income would be over $180,000. If you extrapolate that over a year, you'd make almost $250,000. There is no judge who would think that you are owed any payments. Of course, what Dean didn't realize was that the 15-hour dates she had were all arranged by me. If she were alone, she would probably have to have many 2, 4, and 6-hour dates that would not be paid so generously. Of course, she wouldn't get as big a tip as my fake clients did. She would have to go through a lot of men before she could find the stable clientele she had when Phil, Dewey, and Dave were her main sources of income. In other words, she'll have to sleep with a lot of men to maintain the lifestyle she's accustomed to. And not all of them will be as attractive, well-built, and experienced in bed as Phil, Dewey, and Dave. As an act of goodwill, Thalia continued, Mr. Dawson would like to provide you with a luxury apartment for 1 year, with all utilities and services paid. After that, you will bear the cost of the apartment or find more suitable housing. Talia completed her instructions to Dean. You don't have to decide now. You have 1 week to think about what action you want to take. We will meet here just like today. You may bring your lawyer with you. At that time, you will give us your answer, and you will be served with the appropriate divorce papers by Judge Collier as an officer of the court. You will be required to sign them. And remember, any attempt to amend the claim for divorce due to irreconcilable differences or attempt to counterclaim will result in the continuation of the claim for divorce due to infidelity. Dean lowered her head. Her tears subsided a little. She sat quietly for several minutes. Finally, she said, I think I brought this on myself. I was sure that I could have both. I thought that when you didn't divorce me after I returned from California and we actually got back to normal after a few months, you'd be able to adjust to the limitations dates that I had with clients. I trusted that you would never allow yourself to be separated from our children. I was so full of pride. Dean raised her head and announced that since she still had a week to live in the house with her family, she was going to make the most of this time. See you in a week, Miss Starling and Judge Collier. Now I'll go cook dinner for my husband and children. With these words, she went into the kitchen. I thanked my two assistants for their time and the work they did for me. Shortly after they left, I told Dean that I was going to pick up the kids. When I returned, the children rushed to hug their mother. It became clear to me that despite everything, she was still a good mother. By the time I got the kids home, Dean seemed to have pulled herself together. She touched up her makeup, and there were no signs of tears to be seen. She changed into a simple pleated skirt and white blouse. She looked very at home. It must have taken a lot of effort on her part to keep everything inside. We had a very pleasant family dinner. After the kids went to bed, Dean came up to me and said, "I only have a few days left before I have to leave. I would really like you to sleep with me in our bed until then. I know you don't want sex with me, but I would appreciate it if you would just hold me every night until I fall asleep." I gave in. "I'll do it, Dean. I always liked sleeping with you. I just couldn't do that while you were dating other men and having sex with them." We went to bed that night and cuddled until we fell asleep. When Dean came down for breakfast a few hours later, I said, "I thought you said there wouldn't be sex if we slept together." She replied with a smile that said she knew how much I appreciated her work. "It wasn't sex, it was just the beginning." "I'll never say I didn't enjoy it to the fullest," I replied, "but I always loved sex with you. I missed making love to you these past months, but my pride, anger, pain, and humiliation did not allow me to do it. Now that the course of our lives is about to change and I will have the separation I wanted, I'm not sure I'm so vindictive that I won't be able to touch you again during the last few days we have left together. Maybe even after we separate and get divorced," Dean said hopefully. "We can hang out sometimes, just the two of us, no kids, and spend time in bed." "I'll think about my feelings as time goes by," I replied. At one point, Dean said, "I never knew how much I would miss your touch. I don't know what I was thinking when I decided that this wasn't enough and I needed more." A day or two later, Dean announced, "You should know that I signed the divorce papers. My lawyer will deliver them to your lawyer in a day or two." "Thanks, Dean. I think this is the easiest way to work out our relationship and also the easiest for the children. I'm looking forward to it, but I feel like I need to explain our current situation to the kids after dinner tonight. I will do it, but I want you to be there to help me through the difficult moments and help the children understand what will happen to them." We sat down with our children after dinner, when all the plates had been washed. "Lucy, Gina, Rory, we need to talk as a family," Dean began. "Sometimes in a mom and dad marriage, they start to grow apart. Your dad and I have grown apart. We no longer have the same feelings for each other that we had when we first got married. We now have different interests, and we decided to go our separate ways. This doesn't mean we love you any less than before. You are still at the center of our lives, and we will always be family. However, your dad and I decided to live separately. You will stay here with him in our house, and I will live in the next apartment for a while." The kids were upset and confused, but Dean constantly reassured them that we would remain close. She told them that she would see them almost every day and that we would often have dinner together. We will also celebrate holidays and birthdays in the same way as always. Moreover, sometimes on weekends they will be able to stay with her in her apartment. She tried to convince them to be happy for her and asked them to help her choose new furniture for her new home and help her move. This was a difficult conversation for Dean, for the children, and for me. By the time it was over, it was time for the children to go to bed. I took them upstairs and stayed with them until they fell asleep. When I returned to the living room, Dean was quietly crying, trying not to wake the children. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," she sobbed. "I don't know how I'll survive without them." "You won't have to live without them," I objected. "We'll both have to raise them, even if we don't live together." Although we slept together that night, we didn't have sex. Dean was too full of sadness and remorse to attend to marital duties. However, we cuddled all night. On Saturday morning, movers arrived to pack her things. Since it was mostly clothes and not much furniture, it didn't take long. We followed the truck to her new apartment. The children were looking forward to seeing her new home. When they entered, they decided what they liked. They also loved the bedroom they would stay in when visiting her. What they liked most was the large swimming pool located nearby in the apartment complex. By the end of the day, Dean had completely moved. The apartment was furnished in her style. On the built-in bookshelf, she placed several family photos she took from home. That evening, Dean and I sat at a table under the pool cover while the kids played in the water. "I'll miss you," she told me. "I'll miss you too," I replied, "but I won't miss the hell I've been through for the last year. I won't miss the humiliation. I won't miss being a cuckold, and I hope to overcome the all-consuming anger that I have repressed for so long." "I can't believe I hurt you so much," she replied. "I was so full of myself that I didn't realize how much of a blow it was to your pride and self-respect. I don't know how much longer I would have continued to work there, but I thought that whenever I stopped, I would be able to make amends to you, and you would be glad that you stayed with me, and with the children." She continued, "Maybe it's good that we broke up. I hope that over time we can become friends, close friends, maybe even intimate friends sometimes. We'll see how it goes," was all I could say. It was difficult at first, but gradually our relationships with each other and with the children normalized. It really helped that my mother moved in with us. She occupied the basement apartment as her living quarters. She became the chief housekeeper of the house. She helped a lot with the children, waking them up and dressing them in the morning, preparing breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and teaching them to dance. I hired merry maids to clean my house. When Dean came over, Mom was very polite to her, and in fact they got along well. Mom never pressured me to reconcile with Dean. Through Gary, I was able to follow what was going on in Dean's life as she and Diana discussed their lives. She returned to work. She was good at it, and it paid well. However, she regretted the loss of Phil, Dewey, and Dave, and she had to work without all the fun she previously had and without the high income. Diana wanted Dean to move back to California to live with her, but Dean said she would never leave her children while they were still so young. However, Dean and Diana got together often enough to offer themselves as identical twin chaperones 4 times their normal rates. Apparently, there were plenty of rich bastards who often took advantage of their offer. They held meetings all over the country, and their clients sent them wherever they wanted to see them. They both knew they wouldn't be able to work for long, even for their more mature clients. However, their profession taught them a lot about social graces, and they had enough high-profile clients to start their own business. In addition to being actively involved in our children's daily lives, Dean took advantage of her 6 weeks of tutelage during the summer to give them great vacations. She almost always traveled with Diana and assured me that there would be no services while the children were with them. Once a year or so, Diana would visit Dean and come to our house to see the kids and have dinner. I was always a little cold towards her, and she knew why. If it weren't for her, Dean would never have become a chaperone and our wonderful marriage would remain intact. Meanwhile, I continued dating Jerry. We became best friends, largely because of the friendship that developed between my children and hers. However, we were both still wary of an exclusive relationship. She had been through some hard times 2 years ago and knew what it was like. She wanted me to develop more social contacts, meaning date other women, before becoming serious with her. However, she was a stabilizing influence in my new world, and we sometimes slept together. Many people might want me to destroy Dean socially, professionally, and financially as revenge for her infidelity and betrayal. However, I was pleased. I had my children in a healthy home environment with my mom. Dean continued to play an active role in her children's lives, and she and I developed a friendly relationship. I still had a well-paying job that I loved. I also had many friends with whom I actively communicated. Under such conditions, it is impossible to remain embittered. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.